Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sherry.
And together we are
the Traveling Professors.
Welcome to show number 98. Today Sherry and I are going to take you on a brief walking tour of Florence. This would be our first day in Florence, getting off the train and going to our bed and breakfast, which is actually a convent. And then that evening we did a walk around the city to see where everything was. So that's what we're going to end up doing today. So we'll be going to the convent. We'll end up at the Palazzo Vecchio. We'll go to the Palazzo de Bargello, the Ponte Vecchio, the Palazzo della Signora. We'll go by the Duomo and, of course, the baptistry as well, and then head back and get something to eat. So that's what we're doing today. We'll be in Florence for several shows. Now, for those of you who have not watched some of the other shows on Italy, you probably don't understand how our vacation went. We actually flew into Venice, stayed in Venice for a while, then went to Florence, and then to Naples, and then to Rome, and then back to Venice. So we're kind of jumping around, but right now we're going to be going to Florence. So here we are at the main train station in Venice, and there's the train line that we're taking, the Italio, which is a private train company. They're about the same price, they're a little bit more expensive, but most of the time they are just coming through the major cities. We only had to use the local Italian train system once, and that was when we went from Florence to Pisa. So here's Sherry sitting while we're waiting to get to our train, and then here is our Italio train. And there we are, we're in the number 2 section. Then we get in on board, and later on we'll go first class where they actually have stewardesses that give you drinks. Very, very comfortable, very fast. 186 miles an hour, top speed, or 300 kilometers. When you leave Venice by train, it's just gorgeous. You're going across the lagoon, and then here's a look back at Venice as you're getting ready to leave. And then, we cross northern Italy. Here we are crossing the Po River, great river in the northern part of Italy. And then we end up going to Bologna and then down to Florence. So there's some beautiful scenery to see all along the way. And ultimately we then pull into Florence, their main train station. Now this map of Florence, one of the things about Florence, it is not a very big city. It's easy to get around. You can literally walk from one end of it to the other in a little over an hour. But that's also a problem because as a result of being very, very small, the accommodations are rather costly and the tourists in the summertime are just all over this place. It really can be overwhelmed, but there is a way around it. And here's a view from Michelangelo's Palazzo, which is one of the highest spots to overlook the city of Florence. And you can see the Ponte Vecchio, the bridge over here, and you can see the Palazzo Vecchio at the tower up above it, and of course the Duomo Church, and the Uffizi Art Gallery, and all sorts of other stuff. And so one of the things that you need, and you need to check this out anytime you travel to a city in Europe, see if they have a city card. In Florence, it's called the Firenze card. And as you can see on this one, 72 museums in 72 hours. That's 3 days. You get bus use, tram use, they have free Wi-Fi, they have all sorts of other stuff that you can go to. So you can literally go all around, and you can literally go into all the museums with one special no standing in line. Now, I learned about this watching Rick Steves years ago because he was in Florence, and he said the problem with Florence is it's just saturated with tourists. And he went to the Uffizi Gallery, and so he's looking down the row, and there's hundreds of people standing in line. The wait was, he estimated, was like 2 hours. But he had a Firenze card, just walked right by and went right on in. And that was the same way at the Accademia, at the Bargello, and all the other places that we went. You showed this card, and away you go. So although 72 euros, that's $72, and that would be per person, so Sherry had to have one too. That seems like a lot, but if you start adding up what it costs to go into the Uffizi and all the other museums, it is just superb. And you can get, I assume you can get these online now. When we were going, you had to get it right across the street from the train station. Here we are coming into Florence. This is the map, one of those maps that we carry of all the streets, so you can see where everything is located. So we come in at the main train station, and we calculated that it was about a 30-minute walk to our B&B, which is right over here. So that's where we're headed, to our convent. So we walk towards our convent. We, of course, have to go right by the Duomo and the baptistry. It's just beautiful, beautiful Florence. So we come to the little road, which is just barely big enough for a tiny little car. And we had the address and we were walking along. And so we see these doors and there's the right number. And we thought we were in the right spot, but that was the only sign that was there. We finally just knocked on the door and they answered. We showed them our credentials and then we come in. So here's the antechamber. And then we go into the next level, which is where all of the nuns were located. Now, no one spoke English. No one spoke Italian. They spoke French and Spanish. In addition, we were here in Florence for about 7 days, and it was $125 a night, whatever that broke down to in euros, in cash. I knew enough French, they knew enough pieces of English that we got that all straightened out. They gave us our key, and what you were supposed to do every time you left, you were supposed to leave your key there, and I wasn't really wild about the fact that my key was laying there that somebody else could take and get into our room, so I usually ended up walking out with it. And you can see Sherry there getting to know the ladies really well. And then this is the other area of the antechamber there, and it has its own chapel, which was the nuns used on several occasions, but it was open to everyone. Then there was a dining area where we had breakfast. They served breakfast in the morning, very simple breakfast, biscuits and plenty of fruit. And then looking out, this is towards the garden. Actually, we went up on the second area where our room was located, and you could look out over the garden. So this is a little sunroom that you could go into, and this is looking down at the garden that the nuns had. And then we eventually went down there. There's some beautiful flowers, which of course Sherry just loved this garden. It's right next to one of the main hospitals in the city. There's another area of the garden. And they had fruit trees. Here we have some of the orange trees, some of the oranges that we had for breakfast. We sat outside and had breakfast a couple of times, and on the inside when it was raining, and it did rain a couple of times. So here's the hallway to where our room is located. Pretty narrow. This is a little odd because we've just been in Venice. We had a very nice hotel room in Venice. So we come in here and it's like the purgatory of hotel rooms. We have one little window here, which we actually never really opened because they had the air conditioning on. And we have a little narrow area over against one wall where I tried to do most of my work with the computer. And we have a little bathroom, but it's nice. And then here is our 2 beds. Not a king size, just 2 regular twin beds. As hard as a rock. It was like being in the purgatories of bed. I had to take the blankets that were available, and it wasn't cold, but I used them as padding so that my back wouldn't hurt. And of course, after we left Florence, we ended up in Naples and had another wonderful place to sleep as well. So that was the downside, but it is a convent, and I'm expecting the nuns to have luxury items. One of the issues was the plug on the wall. It wouldn't hold anything. The plugs would keep falling out, so you had to go downstairs and get an adapter. This happened all the time because they just had this giant basket of adapters that you would just pick one until it finally worked, but eventually it ended up working. But let me tell you, to stay in Florence, 2 blocks from the Duomo, for what we paid is at least half of what you'd have paid anywhere else in the city. I know what you're thinking. Professor Bob, how did you find this place? Well, there's an organization called Monastery Stays, and they have accommodations in religious buildings all over Europe. I think there's even some now in the United States. You go to their website and look and get the prices and the system and how it works, and that's how you can hook yourself up with a convent or a monastery or something else. So that was our accommodations, and we came and went as we pleased. They didn't want you to stay out really late, and if you did, you needed to notify them, but usually that wasn't an issue. We were usually back in by 10. We're not party people. So once we got settled, it's time to start walking. Well, here is our route for our evening walk. So we're going to leave our convent. We're going to go down into the heart of the historical district, and we'll be going by what is known as the Bargello, and then we'll get to the Piazza de Signori, and then we'll look at the Plaza Vecchio, and then we will go down the riverside. We'll go by and on the Ponte Vecchio, and then head up into the other area here of Florence, and then come back by the baptistry and the Duomo, and then head back to our restaurant. So we're going to make this nice circle, late afternoon, early evening. So the first place we come to is the Bargello. And this is hard to take pictures of because it's gigantic. The Bargello, which was built in 1255, was obviously a place for one of the and several families that had lived here. Here's a view looking up at the main tower. It's a castle in the middle of the city here. In 1574, it became home of the Captain of Justice, which basically means that this is the local police station, which is what the word Bargello means, police station or court. It has a magnificent set of art, and then we'll be doing a specific show just on the Bargello. Then after leaving the Bargello, it's just half a block or so down to the main piazza, the Piazza della Signoria, which is a big square, and I took pictures all the way around. So here's one area of the square. Here's one side of one of the main buildings that we'll see in a little bit. And here's another one of the buildings. And you can see that almost this whole square, there's restaurants all the way around it. Here's another section, again, more restaurants. And then you come along and you see the equestrian statue of Cosimo de' Medici. It's one view. There's the other view, another one of the main buildings. And then you see this loggia. Now this is the Loggia dei Lanzi. This was built as a public site for various ceremonies. You'll see a lot of these loggia, which actually are also marketplaces. Now they have a lot of replica art in here. This is one of the more famous ones, which is the head of Medusa and the head of, being held by Perseus. But the main thing that you look at when you come to the Piazza della Signoria is the Palazzo Vecchio, which is the home of the Medici, or Cosimo's home anyway. Now this was originally a fort that was built for the priors. Then later on, originally it was built in 1294, and then in 1537 it became the home of Cosimo de' Medici. And we'll go in here and look at it at a little bit, but I'll do more of the history on its own later on. The little opening at the top above the clock is where the prison is located here. Now the tower was added in 1310. It's 94 meters high, and that is from the top part of the building. So it's pretty tall up there, and the clock is not added until 1667. And I always like this. It has basically what I refer to as riot architecture. Limited access on the lower floor. The next floor up is very narrow windows and heavily covered. And then you get your glass windows higher up where it's a little harder to hit with thrown rock. Here's a view up to the next level. And then, of course, a view all the way up to the top of the tower. You can take a tour of the tower. We did not go up into the tower, and they do several other things at night at this building. And then right on one corner, you have this beautiful fountain, which is the Fountain of Neptune. So here's Sherry beside the Fountain of Neptune. Palazzo Vecchio is actually the main city hall in Florence to this day. And it's one of the entrances. You have to go right by the David. It's a replica. The real David is in the Accademia, and we will go there and have a whole show just wandering around looking at Michelangelo's material. When you go through that door, you come into a little entryway, and you can see the second layer windows, how thick they are. This is fortifications. And then you have the shutters on the inside. But look at the paintings on the wall and the ceiling. And then you have the central courtyard, which is, of course, open to the top. And then down below, here you have another little fountain. And this was an interesting place to stand for a while because you had everybody and their brother coming in here taking pictures, just like Sherry and I did, doing all sorts of strange things. And you could have just done a YouTube video on things not to do with the camera when there are other people around. So it was really kind of interesting. And look at these beautiful columns. And then here's a closer view of the columns. And then you go out through this little area into the main area of the building where you have different places to go. And then you have to go up a level. So there's all sorts of access to the regular municipal buildings as well as the museums and things up above. They did have a little cardboard cutout of Dante, and you could become Dante. It wasn't my size. I don't look as good as Sherry. Sherry looks like she was born to be Dante in this outfit of the scholar of the Renaissance. And then we went out through the door and continued our walk. Now, after leaving the Palazzo Vecchio, we would start walking down towards the Arno River, and you see this bridge between the two buildings. The area that the bridge is constructed is where Cosimo's wife, Eleonora, had some of her offices and her rooms, and this connected with the Uffizi, which was where the businesses, all the business offices of the Medici were located. Of course, it's now one of the greatest museums in the world. And then you look at the building, you can still see in this one, you can still see the little bridge, but this is part of the Uffizi. The Uffizi makes a big U. So here you see the big U. So you would come in actually right over here on the left-hand side, and then you go to the lower level, then you go up above, and then go all the way across to the other side, and there's also a rooftop garden and restaurant on the top. Now, as you can see, this is pretty long. They had some artists here, and they were putting away their sale items, so this was kind of a market area at the time. When we came to visit it, and remember we have the Fiorenza card, there was a line of people from the edge of the left-hand side of the screen all the way to the back, and I think the wait was 2 hours if you were at the back. And we just simply showed our card, and they gave us another line where we waited about 2 or 3 minutes, and then in we went. And when you get down to the end, this is the view looking back. They were doing some construction work on the roof and the second level. Then you come out onto the Arno River, which is beautiful. You see the buildings across the way, and then you turn to the right and you see the Ponte Vecchio. There's been a bridge here since Roman times. Now, the Roman bridge was destroyed in 1117. Then they built a new bridge, and it was destroyed in the Great Flood of 1333, and then it was rebuilt in 1345, and it has remained there since. Although here's the one side of the Ponte Vecchio, and here's the other side of it. You see they have the buildings that jut out. They used to jut over it as well on both sides. And they have shops, all sorts of different shops. There's a butcher shops actually in the Renaissance time, and now it's jewelry, gold and silver jewelry. So here you go going on under the inside, and you see where the shops are located. Yeah, a lot of nice jewelry there. Fortunately, a lot of those stores were closing at the time, so Sherry didn't get any jewelry from this location. And then here's a view looking back down the river. So on the left-hand side, that's the Uffizi Gallery and the next bridge. And then going back the other direction, here's some of the shops. So after walking on the bridge, we of course had to get another view of it. So we went all the way down to the next bridge and take this shot back. So you see the other side of the bridge, and you see up above the bridge there's a looks like a blank spot. That is known as the Vasari corridor. You can go from the Uffizi Gallery to this corridor, cross the Arno River to the other side, and then it goes all the way to the Pitti Palace. It was a secret way for the Medici to make without having to worry about their safety. Now, in 1966, they had a spectacular flood, and I'm going to show you some video, a black and white video from the time showing the flood itself, and then we'll get back to the bridge here. But the water went all the way up to just below the corridor. They actually found the goat had floated downriver and gotten in here, and a house hit it as well. And they were just sure it wasn't going to survive, but it did. It made it through. But the water was, you can see, the water was up to a line right across here, as was a lot of Florence, and we'll talk about that as we go to the various museums. For example, in the Accademia, the water got so high that it went up to the upper thigh of the David, and this was one of the great tragedies of art, and they did all sorts of different types of restoration to save as much of the art that was damaged as possible. And then, of course, we got to get some selfies here. So here's Sherry with the Ponte Vecchio in the background, and of course then I take up a lot more of the screen, so the same thing. And then we begin walking back towards the Duomo. So here's one of the streets showing the Palazzo Vecchio, and then we come to another one of the loggias, which is a marketplace area, and there they have the famous boar, the bronze boar, where people come up and pet its nose so that you get good luck. Now, here in Kansas City, we've got a replica of this down on the plaza for exactly the same reason people do the same thing. But it's in need of serious repair, but I had to try my luck. And then we saw one of the street artists doing this chalk painting on the, and then we come into a central area here, and we see the carousel and people mulling around. And here's one of the ways you can get around Florence with a horse-drawn carriage. And then we turn to go back to the convent. Well, on the way back, we of course have to go through the area where the Duomo is located. So here is a picture of, as we come down the road, of the baptistry, which you can see is completely shrouded in covers as they're working on it. They actually were working on one of the doorways as well. And I'm just going to give you some brief information here because we'll spend the show on the baptistry and a show on the Duomo as well. Now the baptistry, actually the first one was built in the 4th or 5th century AD, and the current building, which is built over the top of the original, started construction in 1128 and finished in 1202, and it has 3 sets of doors. So this set of doors, you see how they protect them now? They have these bars that come up to block them at night. The south doors were done by Pisano, and they show the life of Joseph and virtue allegories. And then you have what is known as the east doors, which is the Old Testament. These are done by Ghiberti, and they are so spectacular that this is known as the Gate of Paradise. Ghiberti didn't call it that. That was the name given it by Michelangelo. And then the other set of doors, which they were in the process of working on, the north doors, were also Ghiberti, and they're New Testament stories with evangelists and doctors of the church. And so they're cleaning them. It's one example of one that hasn't been cleaned, one that has been cleaned. So once you get by the baptistry, then you see the main church, the Duomo. The tower on the Duomo was started in 1334 and finished in 1357. The church, present church, because it's built over an older church, which you can go down and visit, and we will when we go into the Duomo for that show. It was started on September the 8th, 1296, and they worked on it until 1375. Finished the church, it did not have a dome on it. The dome was started in 1420 and finished in 1424, which was done by Brunelleschi. And the lantern on the top of the dome was added in 1445 to 1461, and it was then finished with a golden sphere. What's unusual about this is if you look at the facade, you go, wow, that's really incredible Renaissance art. It is not. That facade was added in the 19th century. From 1871 to 1887, known as 19th century Gothic style. So it's added later. So there's the main portal, the bronze door with Christ risen over the top of it. And there's a close-up of the workmanship on the exterior. And then, of course, we're heading back to the convent, so we head to the other side. So this is a view down the church as we get in that direction. There's a little closer, you can see the dome at the top. You can access the dome. We did not climb up that. I'm going to have to bring in a member of my family, my oldest daughter Laura and her husband. He was finishing up his art degree, and they spent a month and a half in Florence, and they went up to the tower when they went up the top and took pictures. I will use Laura's pictures. And then here's another view of the look up, and then as we get back behind it with the setting sun, there's another view of the dome and the other sides of the church. And then we head back to our convent, and after resting a few minutes, we went back out for dinner. And here is our little local restaurant. We ate the whole time there. We ate one night's dinner on the way back from Pisa, and the rest of the time we had breakfast in the morning and we ate here in the evening. And here is the owner and his daughter-in-law and Sherry and I, the Ristorante Natalino. Great food. Sherry and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.